Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Disciple Hour, episode 16. I am Northern Westman, and I'm joined by Ian, Gentile Gentleman, and John Malt. Say hello, fellas.
Hello, hello, Ian.
And Gentile is there. And today's topic is demoralization. And Gentile will give us an introduction. Go ahead, Gentile.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back for episode 16. I had the idea for this episode because I hear people using the word demoralization a lot. Especially in the modern day. It's a term that gets thrown around quite a bit. And I think we as Christians have a very unique place, with how this word is defined, how it's used, and what it can mean for us from our perspective and how we can use it to try and show people, really what is lacking in their life. And some of the things that I'll first go ahead and go over is, what is morality? What does that mean? We all talk about that a lot. And for us as Christians, morality basically means God's law, that God created this world and this universe and that he set laws. The laws of physics are his laws. The laws of the gases and laws of nature are his laws, and he set these things up in a very particular way so that things would not only work, but so that it would also be beneficial for us. Obviously, after Adam and Eve sinned, and they were sent from the garden, the world changed. It became a bit harsher. We had to grow our own food. We had to work harder. There were punishments that came along with that, but the world still sustains us, and the world operates on very strict laws of nature. There are things that you simply can and cannot do, and things that can and cannot be changed. No matter what you believe, no matter where you live, murder is bad. Killing another human being is bad. When Cain killed Abel, that was wrong because God says that it is wrong. He passes on this dictate to us, and we can always appeal to his authority, and we can appeal to the laws of nature to show that violating God's law and violating the laws of nature are immoral. We have this authority to appeal to. So, on other topics, when we say there are only two genders, it's because that is God's law. Those are the only two genders he made. To say otherwise is simply making up human fantasies. To say that homosexuality is good and that it's something that should be pushed or encouraged or allowed, or that there should be pride parades in the street with naked people wrapped in leather, what you're basically saying is God didn't know what he was talking about when he established the moral that the man is for the woman and the woman is for the man, and that the best way, really the only good way that men and women can come together is in marriage before God, blessed by God. And we appeal to this authority because we have these morals. So morality is defined as a distinction of intentions, decisions, and actions between those that are proper and those that are improper. Or we can think of it as a body of standards or principles that come from a code of conduct based upon a particular philosophy. That's a bit more humanistic of a definition, but when your philosophy is nature's laws and nature's God, then you're using the right philosophy. This is what it means to be moralized. Everything that I've described here is when you are moralized, when you have a set of standards and you apply those standards in your life and you expect that people around you will somewhat live up to these standards. That's called being moralized. So conversely, we can talk about what does it mean to be demoralized? Demoralized, the way that humanistic people try to define it, is they describe it as a process of making someone lose confidence, enthusiasm, and hope. Now, that may surprise you because Demoralization literally means the removal of morals. That is what demoralization means. So, why is the definition that humanistic people give us something to do with our emotions? We lose confidence and enthusiasm and hope. Well, in what? What are we losing that confidence in? What are we losing enthusiasm or hope in? Now, humanistic people will try to point us to the government. Like, oh, there's too much inequality. So people, they feel hopeless. They're not enthusiastic about going to work. They try to describe it this way to humanize what demoralization means. They try to use it in a way that basically means, well, if we don't give people enough of this, or if we don't allow them to do X, Y, and Z, they will feel hopeless. But we as Christians really have to try and turn this definition back to what it actually means. Why do these people feel hopeless? Why do they feel unenthusiastic? Well, because they're living outside of God's law. They are engaging in sexual relationships that are unfulfilling and that are outside of marriage and that either lead to illegitimate children or they lead to abortions or other types of things that can further cause you to lose confidence in love, in marriage itself, or even thinking you can get married. It causes you to lose enthusiasm for seeking out, good, healthy, and godly romance. And it can cause you to lose hope and just simply give up on marriage. Like, well, I'm never going to get married because it comes with too many problems, or it comes with this and that. We rationalize away a moral that marriage is the standard of healthy male female relations, especially sexual relations. And when you live by that moral, you'll generally remain enthusiastic and hopeful. When you remove that moral and you basically just say, well, I'm going to sleep with people, but I'm only going to stay with someone as long as I'm happy with them, and then I'm going to move on, you create this cycle of depression and losing that enthusiasm and that hope because you're living in an ungodly way. And this affects every aspect of our life. When we say that the general public is demoralized, what we really mean is that there is no longer a truth in the world. We've heard this term a lot from a lot of people where they say, well, this is my truth, or what's your truth, or that's not their truth, or this group's truth. What they're trying to normalize is that truth is relative. Truth is whatever you make it up to be. It's the idea that human beings are God, at least the gods of our own little world. And so, therefore, I get to decide what the rules of my universe are. And I get to decide what the laws of my nature are. And that no one else can tell me otherwise. That is the definition of being demoralized. Because then I no longer have a moral because I'm not living up to a standard that is bigger than me and comes from outside of me. I'm simply setting my own standards, which of course I'm going to set the standard that is whatever I feel like at that time. And this opens us up to the idea that a lot of us see these days, like, how can people believe that Britain used to be black? They're putting these things out there now in Britain where they're trying to say, like, oh, well, yeah, the first Britons were black people. And, Roman Britain brought all these black people here. And there were black people in the courts. And all of these historical figures that we used to think were white were actually black. And how can people believe this? Well, because you have an entire section of the population that is black or is very liberal and who thinks that truth is relative and that our truth is whatever we say it is. And because they want to believe it, they'll believe it, even if there is absolutely no evidence or there is evidence to the contrary. They won't listen to it because that would be a moral standard of truth, that there is something true in the world. And as soon as you say that there is nothing that's actually true in the world, you can believe anything. You can say anything, you can do anything. Why is it wrong to, for example, for an adult to have sexual relations with a child if there are no morals? This is the core of what demoralization for Christians should be. And when we talk about demoralization, we have to talk about the moving mankind closer to the plane of animals and taking us away from the plane of God. Mankind is caught somewhere between our animal instincts and our godly creator who set these laws for us but gave us the ability to choose to follow his laws or not. We can choose to be godlike or we can choose to be like animals. And of course, Satan wants us to be like animals. He wants to prove that God's creation is just so horrible and that he is so much better than us that he can get us to act like animals. This is his ultimate goal. This satanic worldview that there is no absolutes, that Satan could be greater than God, whereas the truth is nothing is greater than God. When you can hold on to that truth, you are moralized. But if Satan can make you believe that anything could be greater than God or that you could be your own God, now he has control over you. And when governments demoralize us, they pass laws. Well, gay marriage is okay because we say it is. But it's up to us as people to say that we will not recognize laws that violate laws of nature, that violate God's law. You can't legislate us to behave like animals. You cannot normalize us to behave like animals. And this is the viewpoint we as Christians have to have and that we have to bring to the conversation. We have to call to people to live up to something bigger than themselves versus looking into themselves for meaning. And I was fascinated by this topic. You know, a lot of us have seen that interview with Yuri Bezmenov where he talks about the communist plan for demoralization and how this takes about 15 or 20 years. You know, and the way you do this is through constant subversion, you know, the constant destabilization, making people feel like there's a crisis. And this is very important for demoralization. When people feel an existential crisis, they start to cling to their survival instincts. And when they constantly feel like they're trying to survive, morals go out the window. There's this pressure from outside of them that's forcing them to feel like if they don't behave in an immoral way, they either won't survive, they'll lose out on resources, or they'll be taken advantage of. And so they have to be the most immoral person they can be, and they'll be rewarded for that. Existential crisis kicks this in for us. So, creating constant conflict, creating a lack of hope in the future of where your nation is going to go or where your life is going to go, creating a lack of enthusiasm for improving yourself, improving your life, or losing confidence in your ability to live up to a standard causes you to reject that standard. And so we as Christians have to give people the perspective that not only do they not have to feel like the sky is falling or like there's always this existential threat that's going to overcome them because there is a plan, because there is not this winner take all, I have to cheat or someone else is going to cheat me. We have to remove this by any means necessary mentality that people have adopted. You know, we see this a lot in politics these days where, you know, right wingers in America are supporting people like Andrew Tate and people like Russell Brand. You know, Russell Brand is a complete hedonist. He did drugs for most of his life. He's had sex with thousands of women and he jokes about it and promotes it. He is not at all a moral person that we should be holding up. But all he has to do is say a little something the establishment doesn't like, and because we're so desperate and demoralized, we'll support him simply to spite the establishment. And we see the same thing with Andrew Tate, this phenomenon as to why all these supposedly conservative, you know, quote unquote moral people are supporting a guy who made all of his money. He made a little bit of money kickboxing when he was young, and then he took that money and started an online business where he basically forced women to sit in front of cameras for hours while they scammed people out of their money through pornography and chatting online. The guy is a complete scumbag, but the right wing is sitting here defending him because he says simple, basic truths like, men are awesome and, women can be stupid too, type of stuff. Just these vague, nonsensical things mixed in with all of his hedonism. And the reason why is because we are demoralized. We're not holding on to a moral standard. We're not trying to achieve, something close to God's law. We're being reactionary because we're in fight or flight mode and we feel this threat coming from the enemy, coming from the left, coming from anti-whites, coming from people who want to victimize us and do us harm. And so we latch on to people that are completely immoral simply because we feel like they're antithetical to the enemy. And that's exactly the kind of behavior Satan can use to control us and to manipulate us, and that the government, by extension, as satanic as it is, can use to control us and to manipulate us. And it's something that we have to be cognizant of and to develop in our minds when we look at a situation. Is this person I'm supporting actually moral and trying to be moral? Are they appealing to God's authority? Are they trying to live up to a moral standard that is in line with at least the laws of nature, if not explicitly in line with the laws of God? Or am I just supporting them because they're antagonistic to people that I don't like? And, that's a very important question we have to ask ourselves as Christians. And we have to reframe the arguments back into appealing towards a moral standard, into pushing people back into God's law, and not more into this retaliation cycle of demoralization that we find ourselves in. And I hope I explained that clearly. But anything you guys have to offer and throw in, please do so.
I think that's actually a very interesting view of things, that it does seem like what you're saying essentially is that morals get gradually degraded because people are in a constant state of fight or flight. I mean, you know, even to use another example, I think you could look at Donald Trump even. I mean, I know that a lot of conservatives latched onto Trump, even though if you look at the way he lives his life, he's not what I would call a highly moral person. In many ways, he's a very hedonistic individual too, like sexually and whatnot. And, no one doubts that he has a big ego. And, I remember when Trump was first running, people were kind of saying like, "Oh, how can you vote for this guy? How can you support this guy? He's been married several times, divorced several times. It's not a secret that he's cheated on his wives, and he's not." And like, it used to be that you wouldn't vote for anybody who'd been divorced, but I mean, it's kind of like he was still the best option out of all these people, because that's the point we've reached where there really isn't a truly moral individual out there that we can support. And I'm not necessarily advocating for Trump or any political position here. I'm just saying that that's another example of how what happens when you get demoralized. It's that you would have to vote for people who are somewhat questionable in their character, just because they're the least bad option.
Well, let's see, and that's actually such a great example because it opens up the idea of, should we as moral Christian people be selecting a less bad option? Think for a second, if the entire, or at least the majority of the so-called, conservative, white positive spheres, people who are opposing anti-whiteism, opposing this godly force that comes from the government, said, we will not vote for a scumbag. We simply will not show up until you field a candidate that actually lives up to some decent level of moral standard, who is somewhat honest, who does not have this past of shady dealings and sleeping with porn stars and all this other stuff, who people who actually have some kind of track record. If we don't see someone who is at least semi morally acceptable, we simply won't show up. How different the conversations would go, how different debates would have to be, and the different kind of candidates that would take the stage. But because we are demoralized and we will vote for whoever they put in front of us as long as they're antagonistic towards those guys, then they don't have to field anyone who's moral. They simply have to field someone who says, well, I don't like those guys either. And we vote for him. And then they get into office and they're just as immoral as the other people. That is quite literally what I'm talking about. That's the definition of demoralization, because we're not aiming for a standard. We're reacting in a fight or flight mode. Exactly what you said. So that was a great example, Ian.
Yeah, well, thanks. I mean, and I even think about people who do sort of have the moral image. I mean, somebody like Mike Pence or Mitt Romney. I mean, they may sort of look the part, but we can see by, the associations they have that really they're part of the whole immoral system as well. So in a way, it's kind of like it really does almost seem like you can't really expect to find moral people in politics. At least certainly not now. Maybe at one time there were moral people, possibly, but it does kind of raises the question of whether a democratic system is going to produce moral candidates at all.
But this will apply to more than just politicians. This will apply to the sheriff. This will apply to people in institutions. You will simply not obey immoral people. Why should I obey a police chief who is not moral, who doesn't share my morality? But I am, Ian, you made a good point, like Donald Trump. I'm a bit afraid to that it would, purity spiral a little bit. But Gentile, just to reiterate, you mean that if we do not have any moral candidates, then we just should not vote at all? I mean, I don't vote anyway, but
Right. And that's a big question in Christian circles, right? Whether we should vote at all. But yeah, we're using that as an example. But yeah, basically what I'm saying is that if you don't like what's going on in the world and you don't want all these anti-white policies to pass, you don't want these anti-Christian, policies to continue, then you have to actually show up and demand that those candidates be placed. People have to actually show up like the left does and shout at these politicians and rub their immorality in their face to show that if you're going to run a candidate for people on our side, that they have to be white positive, that they can't be anti-white, and that they have to be moral, even if they're not, completely pious or perfect. I'm not expecting perfection, but at least someone who we don't have video evidence or other types of evidence of corruption and bribery and cheating and just other kinds of toxic behavior that all of these people have. Or anytime they take anti-white, anti-Christian positions, that just tons of Christians show up and show that that will not be acceptable. At least while we still have some kind of power and some kind of pull in our nations before it's completely drowned out.
yeah, all right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if we had a moral society, that people's authority would come from morality, would sort of, I think of like I mean, I know it's a fictional example, but you hear about there was like the old Andy Griffith show where Andy was the sheriff of the small town he lived in, and everyone respected him. And you always talk about he's the sheriff who doesn't carry a gun because he doesn't need to carry one because people respect his authority and they respect him as an individual. So, it's like his authority flows from the fact that people respect his character. So, and I know that's just some TV show, which was probably made by non-white people, but I mean, it's it's the kind of the principle I'm talking about is, I think in a healthy society, that is how it would operate. Like people would gain authority by proving their morality.
Well, yeah, and even if we step away from the realm of politics, right? Politics affects us, even if we don't participate, but even on an individual level. As Christians, are we really scrambling? And because we're feeling this existential threat and existential pressure, do we allow that to make us behave less morally? Do we skip out on setting time aside to study the Bible or setting time aside to fellowship with other Christians? Do we not even make a point of getting other Christians in our lives? Because Christianity is a detriment kind of to us in a modern society. Your social standing and other things are at risk if you actually stand up for this kind of morality. So, do we allow that to demoralize us? And then we compromise what we think internally. And I'll give a great example of this. It actually just happened the other day at my job. One of my coworkers, we were having a conversation, and it was about, something serious. I won't bring up the specific topic because that's kind of irrelevant, but it was a moral issue about how this is horrible, it shouldn't be allowed, and allowing this is anti-white, it's anti-woman, it's anti-white woman specifically. We were having this conversation, and he looks over at me and he actually says these words. He says, I'm just really apathetic to the whole thing. I'm tired of hearing about it. So I really don't care. And that is the definition of allowing yourself to be demoralized. It's like, no, yeah, there are immoral things going on. They're happening right here in front of me. But I'm just so tired of hearing about it. And I'm so tired of people telling me I'm a bad person for opposing it. So I'm simply going to stop caring. And whether or not we vote or participate in politics, that right there counts against us as Christians because now we're tolerant of evil. We're accepting of evil. We might not be promoting it, but we're letting that river just kind of flow right by us without even trying to impede the flow. And that, tolerance of evil is a sin. Committing evil and acting evil is a sin, but tolerance of evil, that is also a sin. And I think that's something that we have to keep in mind for sure. Even though it comes with social stigma, we still have to say or do something, even in our personal lives, that says, no, no, I am moral and I don't accept that evil. I don't tolerate evil.
Wow, that's I mean, that's a very powerful challenge there. Yeah, I mean, but I do think about that sometimes. Like, do I just tolerate things? Do I just let it go by because I feel powerless to stop it? I mean, I see so much evil in the world now, and I feel like, well, at least internally, I don't agree that I call it what it is. But am I willing to actually speak out in public? Am I actually willing to, as you say, impede the flow of this evil? You know, even just by saying a word or two here and there. I mean, can I at least give it some? Can I slow it down? Can I cause? Can I at least plant some seed that will grow into a bulwark against it? Who knows? I mean, we should speak out against these things. We should make it clear that we don't agree with this. That we recognize it for the evil that it is, and that we're not just going to go with the flow like so many people do.
I would have to listen to this podcast again and take it all in once again. This was kind of philosophical, but if you got nothing more to add, I want to end it with a random Bible verse that I just drew.
Sure.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
All right, it's Revelation 3:11. Behold, I come quickly. Hold that fast which thou hast, that no man take thy crown. That was Revelation 3:11.
Yeah, amen. A really great
Amen.
verse.
Yeah.
It really reminds us that you're right. We can lose our place in God's kingdom at any time. If at the last moment we do
Hmm.
fall for, the deception, or we do give in to the pressure, you're right. Someone can snatch away our crown, 100%.
Yeah. Hmm. Yep. Alrighty. If anyone has anything to say, any last words, go ahead.
Let me just say that,
Are
yeah,
there-
I love the Revelation quote you brought up. It's it really does kind of capture in a way what we're going through here. There are so many things wrong. There's rampant anti-whiteism. There's all the homosexuality and so-called transgenderism. We get fatigued. We don't know which bad guy to fight. But we have to, even worse than that is, like Gentile Gentleman said, becoming demoralized and just letting things happen. So it's a good verse.
Hmm. Amen. Ian, did you have anything to say?
Oh, I just wanted to say that I really enjoy some of these philosophical discussions. They're actually very interesting, and it's I think that the best way to be moralized is to hold to the truth. Just remember that, as Gentile said at the beginning, I mean, all truth is God's truth. God, everything that is as God created it. So remind ourselves that we have the truth on our side.
Amen. And yeah, I mean, you do that by having a personal relationship with Jesus. And I know that this phrase has been villainized, well, made to look stupid and cringe, but what would Jesus do? You know, uh, it's been ridiculed a lot. And so it's funny to think about it. But seriously, I mean, when you are in a situation and normally you would just lash out or be angry or something, ask yourself, what would Jesus do? I mean, that's how you keep moral. That's how you keep holy, and that's how you become godly and not animalistic, by having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And those will be my last words.
Well, yeah, and remembering to look for Christ-like attitudes in your friends and company that you keep, because that will affect you as much as anything else. You have to seek out a godly spouse, godly friends, godly social circles to limit that kind of demoralizing pressure. And yeah, I guess the last thing that I'll say is that Day of Atonement was a week and a half ago. We didn't do a podcast on that week, so I didn't get to bring it up. But for any and all people who are looking to seek out forgiveness, to remember to ask for forgiveness and to give forgiveness to other people, to remember that this time of year. Feast of Trumpets was last week, passed up, and the whole meaning of that is to be ready and listening, for the call of God when the time comes. And this week is actually Feast of Tabernacles. We're in the fourth day of the Feast of Tabernacles, which is the practice of going out and being somewhere not in your home domicile to be ready for the time when you're called to flee to the place of safety or to answer God's call and to leave everything of yours behind. So in that spirit, if anyone wants to research those topics, those are really great topics to reflect on after this podcast.
Amen. Amen. All right, everyone. Thank you all for listening, and God bless. See you next time.
God bless.
God bless.
See you next time. Good night.